We're gonna cut
einmischen in die Augen. I have toothpaste in my mouth.
toothpaste. Got it. It's okay. We're gonna cut that anyways.
Welcome back to the Better Places podcast. My name is Mike, the Urban Jersey guy.
And my name is Nick, the rural urbanist.
And we're here for another riveting tale of mispronouncing our own podcast names.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done something that begins with RU in the beginning of my name for the channel. So I like the channel name when you read it, but not when you speak it.
I first looked at I was going to be like the Jersey guy instead of Urban Jersey guy, and there was like some really weird channel that was also called the Jersey guy, and it was like a kind of really slimy looking like channel. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like I'm not gonna go beat them in analytics, so it's not really worth fighting that.
No. And it's like, sometimes it's okay to rip somebody off, but other times when it's something you do not want to be associated with, don't do it.
Yeah, let those beasts lie. Transit news.
The first thing I want to talk about, very recently, as some of you may have seen, in California, landslides have once again closed the Orange County transit line between San Diego and Los Angeles. This latest landslide comes only 10 days after the line was reopened for service for passengers. After previous landslides, I believe sometime around the end of April, had shut down the line. The commuter rail service through this area and Amtrak service has long suffered because of unstable land in the region and also NIMBYism. But these new landslides have added a whole new layer to what can go wrong with rail transit. And one other point, if we look at this, and if we look at how the reconstruction's going and compare that to the Philadelphia disaster, there's no contest for which will get finished first.
Yeah, is this one the coastliner, the Amtrak coastliner?
Yeah, I think it's mostly coastliner service that's affected, but there is also some local regional rail, commuter rail type services which are affected, as well as freight.
Yeah. If this was a road like I-95 in Philadelphia, they'd be blasting it with, what was it, like their fake rocks made out of recycled glass.
Oh my God! Wait, I didn't see that. Could you describe to me what the hell that is?
So instead of putting new girders there, because the girders are custom length, you can't just buy them off the shelf. They're going to just backfill the underpass with this aggregate that's actually made out of recycled glass. And I think they do some heat treatment to it to coalesce it all together. So it's supposed to act like a ballast, like kind of the way railway ballast is. But this is just used for fill. And it's funny because they're
recycling.
Yeah, and they're very proud of it because it's made in Pennsylvania as well.
That's the most Philly thing I've ever heard. It's just we have some broken bottles laying around, so we're just going to smash those up and use them as bridge ballast. Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, the situation here is so much more frustrating because you're totally right. It's a road. It has to get reopened immediately. This is a huge thing. This will shut down the entire Northeast. This will shut down the entirety of Philadelphia. And yet a critical rail line connecting two of California's most important cities. Okay, we have a contractor. We're contracting them on emergency status, but we won't know the name of the contractor for 2 weeks. So work already will not begin until 2 weeks after this has happened. In addition to that, the barrier wall that they're building on this emergency basis will also only be temporary. And the city of San Clemente, where this happened this time, still does not know the cause of the rock slide. Although, if you look at pictures, my theory has something to do with the McMansion sitting right at top of the hill. But I don't know. It might be unrelated.
Maybe they were digging a third sub basement for a pool. and it's just like like the ground just started shifting. Well, 2
Yes.
weeks is already kind of fast for like passenger railway service, which is it's a little bit disappointment for emergency services, but that would be like considered fast because usually your bidding and planning process is like already a couple months.
I know. And add on to that your California process, which can add, as our normal co-host would tell you, quite a lot of time.
Oh yeah, Matt's not here today. If you guys didn't notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is busy riding transit projects that are not being sunken into the ocean for testing purposes. So I hope he is enjoying that.
Yeah, he can tell us about the regional connector. That's a really cool project.
Yes.
But we will not talk about that without him here.
And so moving on to our next topic in the transit section, I want to talk about the new BRT line, which the Atlanta MARTA system has just broken ground on today. Mm-hmm. Although by ground is broken, and I'll just show Mike this picture here and you can all look it up. They literally have a trench of dirt above the ground and a bunch of people standing around it with shovels dipped in.
It's like in a studio, and everyone has an orange shovel.
Yes, and they're all wearing hard hats for some reason.
Oh yeah, this is classic American, classic American like starting project. Get the mayor out there with a fucking shovel.
Exactly, and despite the sort of whateverness of this opening ceremony, it actually looks like the Summerhill BRT will be a fairly decent project. So the BRT will connect the Atlanta downtown to the Capitol Gateway, Summerhill, Peoplestown, and the Atlanta Beltline with trips every 10 to 12 minutes. The route will feature 14 stations with level boarding, real-time arrival information, and off-board fare collection. Thank God, shout out to the Silver Line in Boston. And in addition to this, the lanes will be fully separated, although it's not clear exactly what that's going to look like. It's sort of funny. There's a announcer. There's a trailer of sorts for this project, and I thought that it was some renderings of what. Yes, in a world. But I thought it was some like renderings of what this is going to look like. No, they just took little clips and videos from like other BRT systems around the world. It's more like a this is what we want type thing. Instead of like actual renderings of what it's going to look like. But all of the renderings were good. Yeah, so they show the BRT systems in, I think, Colorado and possibly Connecticut, although don't quote me on that. Regardless, it looks like it's going to be good. It looks like they have learned from Boston's mistakes and will actually be having center of the road lanes which do not allow anything else in them. But we'll see.
That's pretty nice. I like that. Do you know the kind of history that was happening with the Beltline? So I stayed in Atlanta for 3 weeks, so I kind of got to learn a little bit of that history from local Atlantites. Well, they have the Beltline is a ring train system around Atlanta. So it's like a way to divert trains away from the center of the city and to go around the city because it's a huge train hub. Anyway, that train line no longer exists, and now it's a big trail that's like almost complete. But there was like a big thing where they wanted to run either BRT or light rail along significant segments of this. So I think this is supposed to probably hook into this. But part of the like big hubbub is like, if you've ever heard of the Atlanta streetcar, it's one of the biggest boondoggles streetcars that exist in the U.S. just because they only built.
Oh, really?
It was like, yeah, they only built like 1/4 of the system, so it's like I think it's only like a couple mile loop, and it's not long enough, and it doesn't connect. It doesn't connect enough. So there was like two competing proposals to either finish that streetcar and have that go along the Beltline and do this route, or forget the streetcar and let's just go with BRT. So I guess this is their choice to go with BRT.
Oh God. Okay. It of course does not mention that in this article. And what's funny? So that actually made sense. So this is funded by Tiger grants from the 2017 year. And they talk about how much more flexible this is than rail. They talk about how much better this is than having a rail project. And if I can read between the lines, they're probably talking about how much better this is than that other streetcar project that got messed up.
Yep, because let's see. Project began 2017, it opened, or 2014, it opened. Oh yeah, so it opened in 2013. So yeah, this is definitely a little bit of shade being thrown at the streetcar. And I think it was not originally run by MARTA, and then it was taken over by MARTA later.
Yeah, one thing about BRT that's actually kind of a disadvantage compared to the proposed streetcar that would have happened is that streetcars mix much better with pedestrians than buses do, just because of the predictability of the route. So I honestly think the streetcar really would have been better in this case because it would have mixed better with the traffic that the Beltline has, honestly. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like just a major disrespect to riders. But it's good to see that Atlanta is actually building lanes for this. Hopefully it doesn't creep in and all go away. But Atlanta has some really wide streets. So
yeah, if they can't if they can't build or fit an effing bus lane in there, then I don't know what city in the world can.
It runs like parallel with like the 13th lane highway, so it should be fine.
So the next thing that I want to talk about is rural transit, which you might say is in my wheelhouse. And this is something that is near and dear to my heart because I grew up in a semi-rural, semi-suburban place. And for me, transit was something that you drove to and then took, as opposed to having it at your front door. And I read this really interesting article that talked about some of the challenges with transit in rural Canada. And what they mentioned was, first, apparently there was a game show unleashed a bunch of British people on British Columbia, and they had to try and navigate the province, all without use of a rented car or flight. So they could only use local transit. And the thing was, as they started to get further away from Vancouver and the cities, they ended up needing to take taxis, which were incredibly expensive, and just relying on hitchhiking, which is probably pretty dangerous.
I think it's like also illegal in Canada.
Probably, but you
don't
tell
Grove,
the
where's the train?
Yeah, it just keeps driving. Yeah, what I found interesting about this is that they really took a look at why we don't have better rural transit. And one of the things that they mention is that, first, there is a lack of literature or studies that have been done about how transit works in places with less people. So the thing is, a transit agency, right, if they want to, say, serve a more rural route, or if they are a rural transit agency, they are going to need to back up what they want to do with research and evidence. People need to be convinced that this is something money should be spent on. But the problem for that is, how can you do that if the research doesn't exist and you don't have the money to do the research yourself? So, yeah, I mean, I think you can kind of see the problem with that there.
Yeah, the like high level service doesn't exist, so someone can't research it, and no one really wants to bother researching it because it's going to be a $500,000 system rather than the massive multi-billion-dollar system in like New York City or something like that, which is much more interesting to research and has significantly more data on it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the research that does exist tends to bias more larger urban adjacent rural communities. Mm-hmm. So, for the few cities that don't have quite so much sprawl, or, maybe it's a place that's adjacent to like a smaller city in the province, then that type of research exists, but not
like the city of Oklahoma
purely...
is essentially rural.
Yes.
Oklahoma City is like...
Yes, exactly. I've never heard anybody call it that before. OKC, yes. The city of Oklahoma, no idea what you're talking about. And, the final thing, and this is something that I think I can maybe expand on a little bit more, is that rural is often treated as a single thing. But I think if I've seen really anything through my research for my videos and just my personal experiences with talking to people about what I make videos about, there are different definitions of what rural is. I don't know, Mike, maybe you think it's a bunch of country bumpkins sitting outside drinking moonshine and strumming their banjo.
It's impossible to get more than an hour and a half away from like a major city in New Jersey. So I don't like rural here doesn't really mean much.
Yes, that's true. It is no longer my father's New Jersey, whereas he tells me about growing up in New Jersey with like farms being everywhere and always like fresh farm goods and no people. Yeah, I know that's changed quite a bit. That's not the New Jersey of today. So it's really interesting because for me, like a rural place still has some suburban type developments, but it's more defined by there are just less people. And that's the thing. So if you have a service which is supposed to serve a rural area, it might not always be serving exactly the same thing. Across its route, it may travel from several different areas. Why is this important? Because I think there's sometimes a misconception in urbanism that maybe the rural places are not as important, and they're probably not as important as a big city. However, if we want to live in a world where people are less reliant on cars and where more people, say, live in cities or with access to transit, honestly, how are people supposed to get out of poorer and underserved rural places if they don't have a way to even get to work? Because not everybody who lives in the middle of nowhere has a car.
Exactly. Yeah,
and I think we forget that.
To also like reframe what you were saying about they don't all go to the same place. Like in a rural area, you're not just taking a commuter bus into a city. You're doing a lot of different things with that. You're going to the doctor's office. You're going to the shopping center. You're going to whatever like accountant appointment that you need. So not all of those things are just like I need to go directly downtown to the middle of a city.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, oh, I'm taking a bus to the mall, or, oh, I'm taking a train, to my job interview in the big city. It's like, okay, yeah, I have to do this thing, this thing, this thing. And yeah, like, for example, the neighborhood that I grew up in did actually have a bus stop at the end of the street. And it was something that I only used ever really once or twice, despite it being fairly regular hourly service. But for me to get to all of the places that I would have need to have gone without a car, it wouldn't really have been possible for me to take that service, because it would have only really served two of the locations that I would have need to have gone to. It wasn't like a larger mesh network that you would need in a place like that.
I guess that's really the thing, is that is like kind of the solution to rural transit is, even if it's not frequent, it needs to be like timed transfers to many different very useful locations. So like even if it's just once every 30 minutes or once every hour, it needs to link up with other buses in other important locations that time transfer directly onto that other bus.
Yeah, exactly. I think most communities would be surprised by what they can achieve if they actually run service like that, and if it's even remotely frequent.
Just like it kind of reminds me a little bit like what the Swiss do for their more rural communities, where they don't have tremendous service like a city would, but everything is very predictable and it's on a clock face. And clock face has its pluses and minuses, but when you're serving like communities on very infrequent routes like that, those clock face schedules can be super useful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think if there's one thing about transit that really improves ridership, more so than speed, more so than frequency, and maybe even more so than quality of the service itself, is predictability and reliability. If you can just show up and take it, more people are going to use it.
Exactly. Urban Development News. All right. I wanted to talk about this plan that just came out. And for people who haven't really followed what is happening in New York, it might seem like a new plan, but it's not really. So I'll get a little bit back into the history. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers just released a plan for seawalls or sea barriers around various different neighborhoods in New York City and in Jersey to protect major population centers. And what this means is they're essentially going to be, if you ever went to like a river town, you'll see that there's big metal barriers along the coastline. And then there's like little gates that open up and you can use the coastline. Have you seen these around?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up about 15 minutes away from the ocean, so we had more like massive seawalls, but I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you're going to be getting is the ones right along the beach, massive seawalls. So, and everywhere near the water that is a low-lying place that the Army Corps of Engineers thinks is worth saving is going to have one of these seawalls.
And I'm really curious, there cannot be any possible controversy with what the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers thinks is worth saving.
Absolutely no controversy at all. Actually, a ton of controversy.
All right, let's just stop recording.
There's a ton of controversy, but we actually really need to know a little bit about the history before we talk about the controversy, because the history kind of guides the controversy. So, Hurricane Sandy happened in 2012 in the northeastern U.S. And if you don't live in the U.S., you probably may not know about this. It is a huge storm. They kind of said it was like a 1 in a million kind of storm that brought in a huge wall of water into New Jersey and New York City and flooded some of the most dense areas in all of the U.S. Caused tens of billions of damage, maybe even 100 billion damage. We can check that later, but it is a ton of damage, and it flooded the subway and a lot of the commuter rail service as well.
And it even flooded the tunnels running underneath the Hudson River used by Amtrak as well as NJ Transit into Penn Station.
Exactly. And that is still a big issue till today. And hopefully there's a project that will fix that. But we can move on from that. So before this even happened, there was people who were setting up various initiatives, and they were like, this is an issue. We know that there's going to be more sea level rise. There was a lot of international reports coming out of that time that in like 50 years, it could be so on and so forth, number of feet. And that would put certain neighborhoods underwater even during regular flooding events. So people were already thinking about this before Hurricane Sandy. But then after that, the government actually had to start thinking about this too. So the governor and the mayor, this was Cuomo and Bloomberg at the time, they were kind of starting to talk about getting an actual plan together to prevent any of this type of flooding in the future. So they actually set up a working group for this, and they started working on a plan, figuring out all of the different various weather events that could possibly destroy New York and New Jersey, and ways to actually solve those.
And that sounds surprisingly well thought out and well implemented from Cuomo.
Exactly. And it's like, wow, we are going to solve the issues that may destroy our city in the future. And this is back in 2013, right after the hurricane. So the result of this study was the big kind of key part of this was the most major issue is going to be coastal flooding from a hurricane event. Or nor'eastern, which is a very similar type of thing. And that's just bringing in storm surges over a period of a couple of days. So the idea was to effectively, if you don't have a map of New York in your head right now, it goes Long Island in the middle, and then there's the mainland in New Jersey to the south, and the mainland of New York to the north. And then inside that area, that bay, there's a handful of other islands and other parts of mainland. But you don't really have to worry about that. So if you really want to just put 2 barriers or 3 barriers to close everything, you do above Long Island and below Long Island to the mainland. So this is effectively what they were proposing. Right. Very, very large storm barriers across the whole bay, the New York Bay. And this would effectively close off everything from storm surges only.
Okay, so that sounds sort of like what they did in Venice then, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly
what they were doing in Venice.
Except, although, if I remember correctly, what they did in Venice so far isn't working very well.
Yeah, they did like pop-up barriers, I believe, and they weren't super effective. The Thames River also has this for London. There's a few cities in the Netherlands that have it, where it's like articulating barriers that kind of like slide out and then close up the actual bay. So this is not unheard of. It's definitely not unheard of. But the big issue with this is the mayor looked at this plan, Mayor Bloomberg. He didn't like the plan for various different reasons. And instead of kind of just saying no, he said, let's get another study. Let's have someone study our study and figure out what we can do differently. So they had a researcher from, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say that sounds like a really great and efficient use of taxpayer money.
Yeah, this is the New York study disease. But you'll see it actually gets much worse. So they had someone study the study, and they're from the Netherlands. They were a doctor. They have their doctorate, and they're very important in researching storm surges and flooding events. So they have this professor, and they look at the plan, and they come up with 7 reasons why this would not be the best idea, effectively. And I can kind of give you some examples of what they're pulling out here.
My thought from the beginning was, first of all, why not just have a Dutch person design this? Because then not only will the infrastructure be good, but also the water management aspect will be good. I mean, it's like a win-win. I don't get it. Why did our wonderful man Cuomo not just have a team full of Dutch people come to the great city of New Amsterdam and figure that out?
I don't know. I think they kind of would have gotten to roughly the same result of this initial proposal, but this proposal, when it was brought to this researcher, they had to kind of come up with alternatives, essentially. So this is not just like, is this good or not, but it's like, could you create an alternative that's better, essentially, or an alternative that would be more acceptable? So they said like some of the issues were it'd be super expensive, like $20 to $25 billion. And if you're sitting here today, $25 billion doesn't sound like that much compared to other projects.
No, it sounds like a real steal.
It sounds
honestly.
like a steal.
Yeah.
So the harbor-wide
screaming bargain basement.
Yeah.
Basement bargain, whatever the fuck.
So like the harbor-wide barriers, it would take like roughly 2 decades to complete. So this was back in 2013. If we started it, it'd be done in 2033. That doesn't feel like too long now, but it felt like long then, I guess. There were some other...
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, looking at the U.S., it's kind of impossible to really plan anything infrastructure-wise longer than one election cycle, which makes things difficult.
And yes, this is where the New York planning disease comes from, is every single time a plan comes back, a strong mayor will say, no, I do not like it. They'll send it back to the drawing board, and then another mayor will exist, and they will send it back to the drawing board. But continuing with some of these issues, they also said there would have to be massive levees along the coast. So this was the thing we were talking about before. People do not like massive levees along the coast because coastal land is very expensive, and people love their views. And the people this would affect the most are the people with sandy beaches on the outer harbor. Because remember, we're protecting the inner harbor. Outside of the harbor is beautiful sandy beaches on barrier islands. So you'd have to be putting a 10 to 15 foot wall along these barrier islands. And that is a big no-go. And I wouldn't doubt that is the reason that this plan got nixed in the first place.
Do I smell NIMBYism? Because
Yes.
that's exactly what that sounds like.
That is what it sounds like. And anyone who wants to get elected or reelected in New York City, they are not going to kill their golden goose and make a bunch of people angry. So I'm not going to go through all the rest of these issues, but you can kind of see like where they're coming from. People want a smaller scope plan, or at least the governor or the mayor wants a smaller scope plan than what was provided. Moving on from here, this kind of stalls out any sort of effort from this agency that was set up by the mayor and the governor. So everyone starts implementing their own plans. New Jersey Transit got flooded, as long as the MTA, that's New Jersey and New York's major systems. So they both had their own flood plans. The city of Hoboken, which is across from New York City, They actually came up with their own plans as well. They actually got grants to do these projects, federal HUD grants, and they started doing these already. They've been working on these for many years. So everyone's doing.
Okay, so what are these?
Oh, so these are very, very localized. These are like putting in like a storm wall along the lowest point of the town. There's parks that actually hold water underneath them. So if there's water inundation, the water will flow into these like underground caverns under the parks and then be ejected later.
So that sounds a lot like what they are doing in Paris right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen, even though Paris is of course not a coastal city, they've actually been doing this to clean up the Seine to make it so that people can swim in the river, hopefully by the time of the 2024 Olympics. Mm-hmm. And they're building these massive underground cisterns, which will hold stormwater and make it so that instead of stormwater always going directly into the river, it'll actually get treated and filtered before being placed in the river.
Exactly.
And instead of overwhelming the treatment plants. Okay, so it sounds like a similar idea.
Yes, exactly the same thing. Although the intention is not for cleanliness, the intention is this water needs to be held somewhere before the water level is lower to pump it back out into the sea. They might be treating it in the future, who knows. But anyway, so these are the kind of scope of the projects. They're very small and they're being done disparately. There's also like our local power companies. They're all like raising their infrastructure and trying to think of little ways to actually save their infrastructure. So everyone's spending a lot of money on resilience because no major resilience program has happened in the region where you could have just protected everyone with a major project instead of everyone's doing many expensive small projects, which are turning out to be billions and billions of dollars. And we're not even sure if it's actually going to protect anything in the future.
No, we may end up with another Venice situation.
Correct. So moving on, what we actually have is someone kind of started looking back at this report and kind of looking more into it. And what was really lost in these 7 points was also part of this reaction from the Amsterdam expert was that by 2020, so they said it would be kind of cost prohibitive now, but by 2024 or 2040, the regional barriers cost would be outweighed by its benefit.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying is that the payoff period, speaking in business terms, for this project would be 2040. So if we build this thing and it's finished construction by 2033, the payoff period is then between 2033 and 2040, whatever. And then after that point, then you are essentially having a net positive for society as opposed to a net cost. Effectively.
Because you're assuming that storms are getting worse at a certain rate, and these assumptions have proven out mostly. And by 2040, those storms would be like maybe producing roughly on $1 billion of damage a year or something like that. So you can figure out when this is actually going to be worth it. So they basically said you should start thinking about this soon. Maybe even if you don't start it now, you should start it soonish. But they were also baffled about how there's like large chunks of the population that are not protected by levees that are like basically at sea level. So they're like, yeah, but you might not have to start this barrier yet, but you really need these levees. These levees all should be there, and then you should be thinking about the barrier later.
Dutch brain does not account for unprotected ocean level dwellings.
Yeah, they're like,
essentially is what I'm understanding.
Well,
yeah, like they come to the US. Dutch person's like walking around and they're just like, oh.
Yeah.
What is this?
Like, why does it flood your town during high tide? This is unacceptable. Which is actually what happens in Hoboken.
No, really?
Yes. Go look at pictures of the Lackawanna train station, and you could just see every high tide, the tracks are underwater.
Oh my God.
It's hilarious.
Okay, so how have we accepted that things are this okay? I don't know. Maybe we have too many Italian people and we're okay with just being Venice.
The Ziti.
When we could be Amsterdam.
I think the issue is we've just not solved these problems in the US. So no one just like cares. There's like, I guess this is how it is. Maybe that's it. Who knows? Well, the saga still continues because we're getting close to the Army Corps of Engineers. Don't fall asleep here. So in 2017, the Army Corps of Engineers, they start their plan because they're like, it is too expensive to leave this region unprotected. We need to do a national scale project to protect this region. So they start in 2017. A couple years later, they release a report, and it's basically a regional-ish plan. It's a little bit scaled back from the 2 to 3 major gates protecting the whole harbor. They want to do 12 separate gates. And essentially these are going to be between like inlets of smaller islands. So, there's this island called Governor's Island, and that's between New Jersey and Brooklyn, and maybe like 2 small gates there rather than a really large gate farther out in the harbor. Effectively, what this would do is leave some communities unprotected or only protected by a giant levee, while other communities have no levee and are fully protected.
Now we get into the controversy and probably the equity problem.
Yes. And it's generally seen that more poor communities would have giant levees, but it was also kind of a mix that rich people would have levees too. It was like almost like maybe we can just screw over everyone and just make a bunch of small levees, small floodgates and levees, and like this would be acceptable. And it might have been a little bit cheaper and easier to do than the larger gates because each one of these gates was much smaller.
Right.
But it's also like you're kind of making more people mad. So everyone, people start flipping tables at this point.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting because it sounds like, NIMBYism is usually something that comes from people who have money to have a yard for saying something shouldn't happen in the back of it anyways. And honestly, like if people are protesting against this who have money and they're like, okay, yeah, let's please let our house be underwater. Okay, fine, let it happen. But like, as soon as you get into an issue where then all of a sudden these people are starting to have problems and then they complain and the thing gets built for them, but not for these poor communities, that's where I think I see kind of an issue going into this.
Yeah, exactly. So like we're kind of set back to step 1 again, because we've kind of rejected every single proposal and we're getting closer to like a major storm event, possibly. Every day you're getting closer to a major storm event as the climate gets warmer. So we haven't done anything. So we're getting to the point where we just have to accept something. So the Army Corps of Engineers go back to the drawing board, and what they pull out is effectively the plan by the Dutch expert. And they were saying that the first thing that you need to do are these levees. Like all of these really low-lying areas need to have levees before anything else. So they're saying, okay, the only thing we're going to do is we're going to do these levees. And this is where the real controversy comes in, because they decide which communities they are going to save and which communities they are not going to be saving in this project. Not everyone will be getting a seawall. Only the most expensive communities in general will be getting a seawall.
Okay. Come on, Dutch people. You can do better than this. But I mean, I'm really interested to see. So, like, do you have some examples of which communities are going to be protected and which ones are getting drowned, essentially?
Yeah, let's pull up a map. I pulled up the thing, Nick. What do you think about these communities that are being saved? What do you see here?
I think those are some more wealthy places, right?
So the first thing you got on the southern part of Brooklyn is beachfront places. So yeah, Stormwall all across the beachfront. It looks like it's going to be just like a 10-foot barrier, and it's the Far Rockaways and Coney Island and stuff like that. There's also a small part. I think that's actually Coney Island that's like left out of the seawall, and it just says induced flooding features. So I think they're not saving small part of Coney Island. So there's your first controversy: is someone's being left out of this.
Great. And so they just picked a place that they're not like. It would be funny if they just had holes in the wall only at like specific places where poor people live. Like if there was just like this like 20-foot gap in the wall where the water just rushes in and just floods them.
That's effectively what they're doing. Coney Island's like the poorest part of the coastal area.
No.
So going up from there, there's other controversy. So Jersey City's downtown is fully protected. None of Bayonne's protected. Bayonne is more of a middle-ish class white community that's gonna have extra flooding happen there. And Hoboken doesn't seem to be protected. I don't know how they plan for the water not to go around the seawall and just flood Hoboken, because Hoboken's essentially an island with marshes around it, except instead of real marshes anymore, they just put a city on top of it, and it's mostly below sea level.
Oh, Jesus. Well, yeah, it seems like this plan has almost a lack in understanding of how water works. Water doesn't just like look at a gap in a wall and say, okay, we're just gonna like go a little bit in there, just where the poor people live, right in front of the wall. Water says, no, I'm gonna go right through this hole, and then I'm going to flood everything. And yeah, maybe the places closer to the wall will get it worse, but it's not like anybody's going to be spared if we don't have a complete solution, is my thinking.
Yeah, this seems like we wanted to save the financial centers and the beach, and everyone else go screw yourself. Like
that's so short-sighted, because like, of course you want to save the financial centers, right? But the other thing is like, we're going to have a lot more beaches, you know, if this future comes to play out, which it's looking like it will. You know, it's like,
even beyond that, it's like these storms are going to cause damage, and that damage is going to cost money no matter what. Like the damage is going to happen, and someone's going to be paying for it. Anyway, this is a terrible plan. It maybe not the worst thing in the world in general, just because these probably need to get built. But the thing is this is only like the first step of a plan. This is only like the one thing the first thing that you need to do. That's what the Dutch scientist was saying, was you need these levees, but you also need some other way in the future to protect yourself from storm surge. So this is not doing that future thing, which is actually protecting us in the future for the storm surge. This might protect you from a little bit of surge, but a lot of surge it will not.
Okay, so the Dutch person gave a good solution for the now. Probably, I'm guessing something along their instructions were give us the lower cost option, and we'll do the correct option later. But that just isn't what's happening.
Yeah, I don't think the Dutch person was stupid. Like, I think when the report was reread, it was just saying you don't have to do the sea barrier now that protects the whole harbor. Just start with the levees and then work on the sea barrier later.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see, like, as we look at the future of, you know, what's probably going to be climate change and what's probably going to happen in a majority of our coastal cities. It's really frustrating and fascinating and horrifying to see cities grapple with what the future of themselves is going to look like. Because I'm just thinking there are so many. I mean, I think if I think about my favorite cities, right, I think my favorite places are really on the coast or on the water in some way. And maybe that's because I grew up near the water, and I think Mike and I have talked, we both have enjoyed sailing in our lives and being on the water, but we don't want everything to be water. You know, it would be great if I could run a sailboat down Madison Avenue, but probably not great for anybody else.
Yeah, not great for the utilities. We might not have electricity everywhere again, or subways.
Yeah, or a country at that point, to be honest.
Yeah, it's the way we're grappling with this. It's just not working. And if we have more hurricanes, the whole East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico, they're going to have to do something, and they have to do something fast. And that fast would be like starting now and maybe finishing in 10 to 20 years, which we're not doing.
Yeah, I think the problem is people have been convinced that the way to solve this problem is only through individual action. Mm-hmm. And we are not going to get there if it's only people driving a little less and remembering to recycle.
Yeah, we need
have to really
a
plan.
large, complex thing.
Moving on in the urban development section, also using an article from the lovely publication The City, which, okay, that's a little bit of sarcasm there. I'm not really sure what to think about them, to be honest. This one comes out of Brooklyn. So Brooklyn, I think most of you
Straight
know,
out of
is another one
Brooklyn.
of the 5 boroughs. Yeah, shut up. You're from New Jersey. What are you talking about? But there is a street in Brooklyn called McGuinness Avenue, and I'm not sure exactly where this is. I don't know. Mike, do you know where McGuinness is?
Like Red Hook or Gowanus, I believe.
So basically, this street has had a high number of pedestrian deaths when compared with comparable streets and traffic flows for the New York region. And in the past decade alone, I think 3 people have actually died on this street in pedestrian related incidents. So the city, actually, to their credit, after the most recent death in 2021, when a teacher was run down and killed, got together community action groups. And I actually think that this came from the city. They brought people together for community meetings and said, we want to redesign this street. This is not acceptable. They actually took like a systems approach, which is what Jason from Not Just Bikes talks about, how they do things in the Netherlands and a lot of other parts of the world, where they say, okay, maybe the street could be at fault. And they kind of took that approach here to redesign the street. Now, what they came up with essentially was some form of protected cycle paths, as well as deprioritizing personal vehicle travel on the street. In addition to this, there are a few other improvements to slow down traffic, as well as make things safer for pedestrians. So I don't think it's a full shared street. However, it seems like not a bad proposal.
Yeah, it's the definitely like the top tier of what you get in America, which is it's still a street, but it's a slow street, and it still has parking, but it has less parking, and they make
Exactly.
crossing the road a lot
It's
better.
going from a 4-lane. It's going from a 4-lane road to a 2-lane street with protected bike lanes.
Yeah.
So that said, what's happened? So the design, I believe, has been rolled out by the city. There's been also a group in support of this called Make McGuinness Safe. And so what I was reading about, this came out on June 15th, this article. Apparently, there is an opposition movement. Oh, joy of joys.
Gotta love people who oppose safe streets.
Yes, because why would we want safety when we can have commerce? So this group is called Keep McGuinness Moving, which, yeah.
You should see their branding. It is slick, and someone is pumping money into this because they are plastering it.
Have you
everywhere.
actually seen? Have you seen the branding for this?
I have, yeah.
I know you're a little bit closer than I am. Okay, so
I follow New York transit
correct.
advocates, or like cycling advocates. So they've been posting about this.
So you are correct. It is funded by a shadowy group of stage performers in the New York area. Yes, a cabal of actors. So, okay, not exactly, but basically, there is a company called Broadway Stages. And what this company is in the business of doing is stages. So they have over 60 sound stages in the New York area. Essentially, they're a mix between a production company and a studio. So it would be almost like if a company like Warner Brothers on a smaller scale or something like that decided to pick a random ass street in the middle of a city to propose a plan for.
Do they have like a warehouse around
got.
there? Because there's like warehousing in this neighborhood.
Yes, and that's part of the problem. Okay. So their argument is essentially that this will make it extremely difficult for deliveries to be received. And I mean, I guess stages, kind of has something to do with you need to get props and things delivered, but it shouldn't be an issue on a 2-way street, right? Like they're never going to need to throw an army, an armada, if you will, of vehicles full of, I don't know, painted trees or whatever. I don't know what stage people do down the street.
New York has plenty of 2-lane roads, and they still drive massive trucks down these roads, whether they're illegal or not.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, what's really weirding me out about this is this production company has apparently ties to several other businesses, and 51 of the 188 businesses listed on the campaign's website as opposing the Department of Transportation's street redesign, 51 of those businesses are companies that can be traced back to the owners of this production company. Yeah, it's a little bit strange. It's a little bit weird, and I don't really understand it.
This sounds not very strange. It sounds very, very New York money, because people with money are also have certain connections in New York. I'm not going to say mafia, but
yes.
it is mafia-like because it takes from that. It is kind of like the next.
Yes, and we need to, we need to be careful with what we say about I think the people involved. A certain Gina and Tony Argento. Of broad.
I think the people opposing this Safe Street redesign, I'm sure they're very nice people, and I never said anything bad about them. And please don't kill my family.
Jesus Christ. We have been intimidated. So apparently the core of what happened and what they're talking about in this article is apparently there was a meeting for public input. However, I'm not sure how the meeting was organized. It was not an official public meeting, but it was mainly it was supposed to be for everybody, but it was mainly for people who were opposed to come. And apparently some of the planners were there to take note and everything. And there was security for this event. There were signups ahead of time for people to speak. And several of the people for the plan had signed up to speak. But when they got there, security specifically barred them from entering.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they knew who these people were, but they were probably wearing shirts saying, I support this, I'm this, that.
I don't know how they did it
security
either.
Blocked them.
But it's like they apparently managed to block out essentially everyone who is for the redesign.
Exactly. And this meeting was held in a warehouse, and outside you can hear the muffled chants of the people for Make McGuinness Safe.
Yeah, and it looked like it was well over 100 people. It may have been hundreds.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact number, but
it was more people than that was in the inside the warehouse.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing. It's like, if you're going to have a meeting for public input, even if it's not an official meeting, like, you shouldn't just hear one side at a time. I don't know why the city agreed to this, because the people who are for the safer street have pretty much played by all the rules. They've gone to the meetings. They've done their due diligence from at least what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't, I understand it. I mean, it's like we've come to expect this kind of shit, but it's like unbelievable to see it happen in real time.
There's like over 100 pedestrian deaths per year in New York City. There's thousands of major injuries caused by pedestrians getting struck by cars. If it takes this to redesign a street every single time, hundreds of people, thousands of people are going to die, because this is going to take 30 years, if not longer. And it's going to require advocates to dedicate large chunks of their lives to doing this. They are spending, hundreds of hours, each of them, like just trying to get one redesign through.
Yes, exactly. And for me, this is like the double-edged sword of being an activist in this field. It's like, I think that there are genuinely a majority and a lot of people who, on many sides politically, who feel that things like this are good and should move forward. But the opposition, the NIMBYism, is so loud and so powerful that it's a good way to waste your life if you're not careful and selective about the things that you advocate for. Moving on, I want to just show you some of the hot takes that came out of this meeting.
Spicy.
Because they're, oh boy. I'll start with probably my favorite. So, according to the city's report, several women in Keep McGuinness Moving t-shirts denied that Broadway Stages is leading the efforts. I'm more scared of a bike hitting me with my stroller than I am of a car, said this person, 21, a fourth-generation Greenpoint resident, who actually started the group's Instagram account just under a year ago. I was happy that Broadway Stages got involved.
Oh, God. right after. I don't think it was Broadway Stages. Right behind them, I love Broadway Stages. Broadway Stages is good.
Yes, they're paying my lunch. Second hot take, there's employees that work there. End quote. Basically, someone...
People work there.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yes. How can people get to work in the middle of New York City if they can't drive there? But having a business, having people come to my business for lunch, parking, and, trucks coming, deliveries, all that kind of stuff, it's just going to be a hassle for everything.
Yeah.
It's like...
A reminder, this actual road is served by two metro stops. It's served by two G line subway stops, which is not like the easiest subway to use, but like it's in New York City. Just to reframe where we were, I think I said Red Hook. I was wrong. Greenpoint, because you just said Greenpoint. And if anyone wants to know what Greenpoint was, it was like a very former industrial area. After all the industry left, it became like lower middle class. So part of this kind of controversy, as some would say, is that younger, wealthier people are moving in, making the neighborhood nicer, and forcing out the people who've been there for a while. Their families probably worked in these factories and stuff, and they're lower middle class, kind of sometimes poor people.
To be completely honest with you, when you frame it like that, and I did read something to that effect in this article, I completely understand and agree with these people that nobody should be coming into the neighborhood and just specifically pricing them out. Mm-hmm. As good as sometimes change can be for a neighborhood, that type of change really doesn't help when you just gentrify everything to hell. That said, this is not what this street redesign is.
That's it.
Honestly.
But that is what they're telling. That is what Keep McGuinness Moving is telling a lot of these shop owners. And I'm not sure if you saw this article. It ran across my feed. A guy who was asking, he was on the advocacy side to actually get this project done. He asked one of the shop owners, like, why do you oppose this? And the guy just like assaulted him. Because
oh my God.
Because he's being told from Keep McGuinness Moving that they're trying, like wealthy white people are trying to run you out of business and they're trying to force you out. And this is essentially like a conspiracy theory. They're going to run you out of business with this, which it is possible that he might go out of business because other stores will open up and be more popular. And the neighborhood has already changed. There's already a ton of younger, wealthier people there. They're probably going to start frequenting any sort of new place anyway, rather than these old places. So it's like it's hard to talk about because it's like the change has already happened. Yeah,
I know. I think this is maybe some redirection happening, and if I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the forces behind this are trying to redirect people into finding someone else to blame besides the people causing this gentrification in their neighborhood. Oh, they want to make this street safe so that yuppies can bike their Scott bicycle down the street. I don't know.
It's an easy way to whip up some anger that will get people to stop this redesign, because that's what's happening. There's just people behind the scenes wanting to stop the redesign.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think nobody's talking about stopping it from happening. At least not the majority of the people. Oh, I'm so scared of a bike hitting me. I'd rather get run over by a car. But I think there's an agreement that something needs to change on the street from at least a few of the people who were opposed, who I saw gave comment. But it's just they're like, we shouldn't be doing exactly this plan. Mm-hmm. And It just sucks to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened in Hoboken's street design. They're like, we want to see a change, but we don't want to see bike lanes. So they made some bump outs, but they didn't get rid of any parking, and they didn't make safe bike lanes. So that's effectively, I think, what people want is they want bump outs, and they want it to look a little bit better, but they do not want to get rid of parking, and they do not want to get rid of traffic lanes.
So frustrating. But if I could share something good, look at this.
Oh,
this is America.
Okay, so I will explain this. This is a nice raised cycleway between a sidewalk, cycle track, between a sidewalk and with a little bit of berm before the road starts, and then the road seems to be fairly narrow 2-lane road.
Yes, it looks like it's a one-way road. And yes, it is a one-way road. And do you want to guess where this is?
Everything's in Massachusetts, isn't it?
Yes. How did you know?
Because they're the only ones building cycleways.
Yeah. What are these called? Right? Like, if we can just, is it a cycle track? Is it a cycleway? Because no one seems to know. And I've heard, like, nobody wants to call them bike lanes, but am I being pedantic?
Yeah, because like a bike lane assumes that it's in the road. It is a lane of traffic.
Yeah.
And the
exactly.
other term assumes that it's not with traffic.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so funny, because I do hear people. I remember before I really got into my like urbanist
mind disease.
Before I became diseased with urbanism and became an urbanist, that's the word. Someone said to me that like, oh man, bike lanes are so terrible. They're so dangerous. And I was like, I didn't really have a good argument against them because I didn't really understand that there was something besides a lane in the road. And now that I've come to Europe and like seen stuff like this and used it, I can like effectively say, and that's why naming is important, because if you can't say exactly what you want with a piece of infrastructure, they're going to build the wrong thing. Yeah.
And that's why we come up with the word sharrow. Because like we want people to know like this is a totally different thing than a bike lane, and that's totally different from a cycle track. Anyway.
Exactly.
Experiencing urbanism.
Yeah, Mike, I think you want to talk about one of the places where you have been.
Montreal. Montreal. French. It's a thing. But I've been to the city already for 3 months of my life. Went there first time for 2 months, and then I just went there again for another month. And the big thing that really made me want to go back there is it seems like one of the most livable cities to me. And the way I say that is like I don't get tired out from being there. Whereas a lot of cities I love visiting, and I get tired, and it starts to grate on you after a while, and you're like, I can leave. I did the things I wanted to do in the city. I can leave now. But when you're there's always an opportunity to kind of find something different or find a place to relax while you're still not leaving the city, while you're in the city. And I think the big thing of this is they've turned a lot of their spaces into pedestrian spaces first or pedestrian priority spaces. They have their summer streets program, where they've turned all of Mount Royal Avenue into a pedestrianized street. And I think it might be the longest pedestrianized street in the world, like where they took an actual urban street and completely pedestrianized it. Someone said that on Twitter recently, and I'm not sure if there's some caveat to that, but it's a few miles long, and it goes from like the Olympic Park up to like the mountain. And what they do is they put street furniture out. It actually is like some of it's like real furniture. It looks like a wooden lounge chair, and you'll see people laying in the lounge chairs. There's there's like creative things. There's like a pool, quote. And what's actually happening is they have fans on either side, and it looks like a pool. Like they painted a pool on the ground, and it's blowing air at your ankles, so it feels like it's cooler there.
That's so dumb, but like so cool at the same time.
Exactly, it's fun. Like you're like, oh, I'm a little hot. I'm just gonna go stand in the pool for a little while, and it's just like,
Jesus Christ,
it's stupid, but it's fun. And then there's
but it's cute. Yeah.
There's sprayers there where when it's hot, you'll just you walk into the sprayer and cool down for a few minutes. So there's a lot of like,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and then all of the life from the buildings spill out onto the road. So all the doors are open. A lot of the restaurants are serving outdoor food, and a lot of the even the shops are bringing a lot of their stuff outside. So it seems like a bazaar outside rather than a road with just like a canyon, and then you have to walk into places to actually experience it.
You know, as I've been learning more about like what makes a good space in a city, shops and things on the street should feel like more of an extension of the street. Mm-hmm. They should be connected. They should be one. They should flow. And I know that's a bit like esoteric and kind of high ideals, but it is possible to have places that like this, and it sounds great. I cannot believe that Montreal has done it in North America. I can't believe it.
Yeah, and it would probably blow some people away if they were like about an hour and a half plane flight from New York City. There is this place that seems European to an American who's never been to a European city. But it even feels like a European city to people from Europe too. I will say that. But
that's awesome.
It's every time you go somewhere, there's another place to experience. So besides the pedestrianized roads, there's also these green alleys. Do you have a lot of cities with alleys? Like New Jersey doesn't really have those.
So in Bavaria, not so much. It's a bit of a different layout for the cities. Mm-hmm. I will say where I've moved to in the previous month, Heidelberg has more of these Gasse or alleyways, mm-hmm. as you would say.
Yeah.
Smaller streets.
Okay, so are they like service roads or are they like just smaller roads?
There's a mixture of both, but service roads are less common in Europe than they are in the U.S.
Okay, yeah.
Where I grew up in the U.S., we did have alleyways.
Okay. Yeah, because New Jersey doesn't really have alleys. So these have a lot of alleys, service road alleys. For a long time, people would just park back there and they'd be parking in their backyard. A lot of people recover their backyard. Many people got rid of their cars or they keep them in parking garages. So to recover the space, they actually create these programs where the community will go together and say, yes, we want to dedicate this lane into a green alley rather than a parking spot. So they remove the rest of the cars from there, and they actually allow people to put planters and like maybe even gardens on the street. And a lot of them are like, they remove the asphalt and it's like pebbled grounds or like grassy grounds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it like
that's really
extends their backyard, but it also allows, like, if you want to walk parallel with the road and get off the street, you can walk down these alleys and like you're in a grassy little cozy area without cars.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experiences with Montreal are maybe of a bit of a different flavor than yours, because as a former resident of New Hampshire, I'm going to give you one guess what the purpose of Canada, Quebec, and Montreal was to us.
Drinking underage.
As teenagers. Hey now, drinking legally.
In Canada.
Underage. Yes. But my experience is, I mean, I think the first time I was in Montreal properly I was probably 19. Mm-hmm. I think me and a few friends rented an Airbnb for the weekend. And we went up there and we had a great time wandering around the city.
So instead of
drinking as soon as we arrived,
instead of the Jersey Shore, it was the St. Lawrence Shore for you guys.
Yes.
So like you probably missed out actually, even if you did walk around and you weren't just like doing the regular college thing of just getting drunk in the city. It's changed a lot in the past decade or so. And a lot of the change has happened in the past like 5 years. So it would be cool for people to actually see these places and see how quickly they actually got a lot of this done. And I was talking with one of the people who actually helps get these projects done, is they'll do a 2-year pilot of just recapturing the space using paint and like wood and stuff like that. Very, very temporary. And that's what some of these open streets, Montreal Avenue is more like this. And then what they'll do is if the pilot's successful at the end, they'll actually go and create a plan to make something permanent. Sometimes these temporary plans just remain temporary and they just remain a summer streets program. And some of these actually get turned into real things. So there was this one place on Peel Avenue. This will mean nothing to you, but there was this weird intersection and it wasn't really necessary. So what they originally did was they painted it and like they put like a little like jungle gym there, and they just recaptured this unnecessary like side street. And then it was super successful. So when they redesigned the rest of this avenue, they just turned this temporary park into a real park, and they went and actually dug up all of the asphalt, and it's like, real grass, real trees, and everything there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Because, I mean, my experience in Montreal, don't worry, it was not only drinking, but there was...
Do you hear that?
Yeah.
Give me a second.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike has left his chair, and he is on his way to kill the insurgents currently assaulting his flat. Soon we will hear him launch his AC-10 and lay down hellfire and fury upon them. All right, so we'll get where we can with this. Yeah, so in Montreal, we really did experience the city. Like, the parks there are incredible, and the city just has a wonderful like park system and just very green areas. It also has a great metro system, and I really, really enjoyed using it. Yeah, I would love to go back to Montreal, and I'm curious if a lot of those changes, have they happened since COVID or?
Yeah, so I think they started a little bit before COVID, but COVID definitely accelerated a lot of the temporary open streets. A lot of the like things like those small parks, that project was going on before COVID. So significantly more open streets recently. But also like you were saying, the metro, when you're talking about a truly livable city, the ability to get long distances without really needing to think about it is amazing. And all the time when I would go to a place I really wanted to go, it'd be near the metro, and I wouldn't have to think about it like at all. I would just hop on the train and like just wait for my stop. You don't have to worry about schedules when it's every 6 minutes, even though like 6 to 8 minutes sometimes isn't great. It's still at the point where you don't run to the train station because you think you're going to miss your train.
Exactly. Oh, God, I hate that. I have to do that all the time in Germany. So if I can talk about the wonderful French-speaking place where I visited in the previous month, I was recently in Paris for my wedding anniversary with my wife. And Paris. Je mange un baguette.
Continue.
Yeah, so we were in Paris for this weekend for our wedding anniversary, and we ended up really enjoying it. So I've been to Paris now 3 times in my life. The first 2 times were before I had graduated. So the first time was 2010. When I was younger, it was my first time in Europe. And we really did a France-centric tour with my parents. And it was just our family. And it was, as a kid, it was exciting. But to me, my memories of Paris it was hot as hell. It smelled like diesel fumes constantly. Mm-hmm. It was dirty, it was crowded, it was dusty, and it was not a great experience. We also had bad luck in finding food. And it's frustrating because my parents really
I had the same issue.
Cuisine.
The restaurants are not open when an American eats. Like, Americans eat at certain times, and Paris restaurants are not open during those times.
Oh, yeah, no. It's like, so my before college eating times were not compatible with Paris, but my after university dinner times are compatible with Paris. Yeah. So that may be part of why I had a better experience this time. So that was the first time. That was 2010. That was before a lot of the changes that have come to make the city what it is today happened. 2015, fast forward 5 years, I was there again with a really shitty high school tour group. The city was a little better this time. I think it was, to my memory, a little bit greener, and maybe there were a few improvements, but things hadn't really launched off yet. There were still a lot of the problems. We actually had some issues with pickpocketing, I remember, and some other minor issues that kind of populate many people's experiences in Paris.
Yeah, the one thing everyone told me when I was going to Paris was make sure you keep your hand on your wallet, because I guess every time someone comes to Paris, they get pickpocketed.
Well, I mean, this is weird because I also like doubt people usually who are too worried about that stuff as maybe they watch too much Fox News. But I remember we were coming up to a metro station, I think at one of the elevated metros, and these women like started walking behind me, and I was a pretty easy target back then. I was a complete dork and dressed like an American. I think I even had a fedora on or something.
Oh, God.
I'm a completely different person than I was 5 or 10 years ago.
Thank God.
That said, these people, these women, I remember somebody came up behind me and I felt like this light pressure, like somewhere near my ass and like somewhere between my ass and my leg. And I turned around and then this woman just like went like she was trying to throw something out in the trash can. And I was like, okay, I think that person just maybe tried to pickpocket me, but I don't know because they were really good if it was. And then she just looped back around to where she came from. So probably. But so you've been to Paris. When were you there the last time?
Like 3 years ago, before COVID.
Okay. So how was your experience?
I was very neutral on Paris. I think it was a little too hectic for me. And we went to like various different neighborhoods and it always seemed a little too hectic. It never really felt like it was like one of the places where it was going too fast and I just wanted to like leave after I was done. But it was fun and it was like I got to see nice things, but everything was going very fast. And I think a lot of that is like there was a ton of traffic and a lot of foot traffic and it was like wall to wall.
Yeah, so and that's how it was too for me the first few times I was there. It was crowded, it was overwhelming, and I think part of that was we only went to touristy places, I think. And as much as my parents don't really like to do that, in Paris, you kind of feel almost forced to. And, you have to see the Arc de Triomphe, you have to see the Eiffel Tower, you have to see...
Yeah, people will say something
really
if you don't actually see those. That's like, it's a shared experience for everyone who's gone to Paris.
Yes. And they are incredible. I mean, I think the Eiffel Tower is a beautiful, like graceful structure. The Arc de Triomphe is incredible, despite it being surrounded by like 10 lanes of traffic on every side. But yeah, that is shocking, by the way. But that said, now that I've been there twice, this time with my wife, and she is not so interested also in always doing the touristy stuff, we wanted to break off from the regular beaten path, as it were. And so the first day we sacrificed, it was like, it wasn't a full day. So we sacrificed that to doing the touristy stuff. It was beautiful. We had a good time. We didn't go up anything. We didn't go on anything. We just saw it. And that was good. It was a good experience. And we still managed to have like some decent food and have some good experiences. Then the second day was absolutely incredible because what we did was we went to some places where I think maybe tourist guides would maybe warn you not to go to, like Belleville. I don't know if you know Belleville. It's a park with overlooking views of the city.
I don't think I went there.
Okay, so it's not too far, I think, from the 18th and 19th arrondissement, which is near the two train stations of that area. They have some rougher areas, and it is very there's some interesting things I saw in that neighborhood, which I will not get into here. But we had probably the best food that we had the whole time there. I mean, we've had just amazing, like beautiful quality food, and it was not that expensive. But it was cool. There were lots of younger, like artsy type people there and just kind of enjoying the city. It was not crowded. There were a ton of foreigners there. So there was like foreign cuisine from all over the world. And we ended up spending a good amount of time there, which is not what most people do. But what we realized when we were in the city was that from the last time I was there are a lot more bike lanes. The bike infrastructure is a lot better. And I don't know if you know the story, but a lot of this has changed since the pandemic. It started before Anne Hidalgo, the mayor, is a leftist, and she really pushed for a lot of these changes.
Yeah, I heard that I think what I just witnessed when I was there was they had just removed cars from along the Seine, right?
Yeah, the Seine, yes.
I believe that's what just happened when I was there.
Yeah, and the whole river did not have cars because even when I was a kid, there were places you could, of course, walk there. But yeah, no, they've been slowly removing cars from down there because Paris is a very car-centric city historically. And it's really, actually, I think it would surprise a lot of people to hear that. But the city is very friendly to cars. When I was there the first time, In 2010, I mean, cars could park on the sidewalk when there was no street parking. They could park pretty much wherever they wanted. So that has changed. There were no cars on the sidewalks when I was there this time. In addition to this, there were a lot more like pop-up or informal bike lanes, but they were mostly protected. And they were slowly in the process of making them real. Like the streets were kind of a mess in terms of that. And traffic was still really bad. I mean, it's shocking how many people drive there. And it is kind of culminated in, on one of the days, the metro line that we wanted to Belleville was closed for some sort of renovations. And we ended up needing to take a bus. And this bus was the single most crowded and slowest bus I've been on in my lifetime. It was not a bendy bus. It was a single bus with 3 doors along the side and completely standing room only, to the point that when someone wanted to get out from inside, half of the bus had to get off with them.
You're not selling me on Paris.
And no, and it took forever to get there. No, here's what I will say is better about Paris. So when I was there as a kid, crowded, busy, dirty, blah, blah, blah. The city feels cleaner to me. I didn't feel as uncomfortable as I did about, the types of people that were, and don't get me the wrong way with this, but that were hanging around and like looked like they wanted to commit crimes. That's maybe sounds bad, but I didn't feel like it was as rough of a city as it was the first time I was there. There was a lot more greenery. There were less cars parked everywhere. The metro was really incredible. My God, the frequency and the quality of the service on the metro was good. The ticketing was actually pretty easy to understand. The food was incredible. There were still less cars than there were the first time I was there. I mean, it was so bad in 2010. I don't think I've ever in my life been somewhere with that many cars as I remember there being in 2010.
Yeah, it's like my first memory of New York City was like around Times Square and stuff, and I think this was a little bit before they started cutting off those streets and making them smaller. Yes, and it was just like bumper to bumper taxis, and it was just like chorus of horns all day long.
Yeah, I think for me it's like it is an improvement, right? It's still not my favorite city in the world, but now I'm at the point where going there, I actually enjoyed the city and would recommend it to other people because we came in with such low expectations. I thought this was going to be, I knew about this stuff with Anne Hidalgo, but I was kind of like, okay. And I thought I was going to come in and just it be how it was when I was there before with like, oh, look, a bike lane. But it ended up being like, oh, look, this entire street is for bikes only. Oh, look, there's a new pedestrian plaza. Oh, look, the metro still works as great as it ever did. Cars aren't parked everywhere, and the emission standards are much better.
Yeah. And it's like you get to see and experience so much because the places are comfortable to be in, and you actually want to be there.
Yeah.
You don't want to just run through and like take a few pictures of the architecture and then like run out.
Yes, exactly. Some of the neighborhoods really that we got into, the pace of life was just slower, and it still maybe wouldn't be my first choice to live in, but my God, I would visit again in a heartbeat.
YouTube video check-in.
Mike, what are you working on at the moment for your channel? What's in the works?
So I still have my burroitis video, and we talked about that last week. I won't go over it. But I filmed something in the meantime while I was in Montreal, and it is actually a full walkthrough of the longest route that you can take in the Montreal Metro. This is very like Miles in Transit-esque, if you've seen any of his videos.
Yes. Yes.
So,
hi, Miles.
I love Miles. Yeah, Miles is good. We'll have him on one day. So it's
Yes.
pretty far that you can walk in the Montreal Underground, and it's kind of a lot of different vibes that you get from it. So I think it will be a really cool video. I'll kind of fast forward through it because I think it took me a while. I'm not going to tell exactly how much it took because I time it right from the front. I have a clock out and I time it. But I really only go like 4 streets, but it's a big U. So I'm going like 15 streets down, like 3 streets to the right, and then like 15 streets up, all underground.
Oh, wait, so did you walk it or did you take it?
Walk. It's an underground city.
I had no idea. I'm going to click on that video so fast when I see it. Holy shit.
Yeah, it is cool. And I think a lot of cold weather cities have a lot things like this. Toronto has one. I think Milwaukee has the equivalent thing, except it's overpasses rather than underground. But yeah, it was super fun. It was a little weird and very sweaty, and it will be out soon. And then I'll get back to doing my burrow-hitis video.
Very weird and a little sweaty. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, the temperature changes so much between every single building. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, God. Okay. I mean, if I can ask you a question, I think maybe the people who listen would be interested. Because I think I struggle as well with release schedule and timing. What are the challenges you face in like getting a video out and how long the time is between releases?
I do a lot of polish on my actual script. First thing I do is outline, and then part of the outlining is research. So every single video I will probably rereading, at least one research paper or one fairly lengthy article about something. There's only been there's only been 2 videos where I've only just read like a couple articles and then did the video. So it's like many hours of research. And then all the outlining, and then turning that outline into an actual thing I could read out. That's the most amount of time of anything.
Yeah. I actually think I'm in kind of a similar boat, and I'll roll this into what I have to say about my video. But yeah, I really struggle with being happy with my script. I personally think that the way that I write tends to be kind of out of order sometimes. I'm pretty disorganized with my thoughts, and I might write something very competent, and maybe it's in order, but more often than not, what I end up finding, and I just realized this with the latest script, is I will have like a perfect intro, but it's like several paragraphs into my script, or I will have this beautiful thing that could go in this order, but it's actually after the thing it should be before. And I think it's because I just think in these like incomplete sets of information, and it just gets written down like that, and it kills me. And part of it's the research too, because I'll research things in spurts and starts, and so then like I'll maybe write what I was thinking about with the research, because it's really hard for me just to sit down and write a script from start to finish. And so I'll usually research a certain piece of something and then write that part of the script. And then what ends up happening is I'll usually record the thing once, thinking it's like my final recording, and then realize the whole thing's out of order, because until you hear it out loud, you don't realize it.
Yeah, and I do a dry run script with my SO. So I'll actually read it out, and then they'll be like, no, that didn't sound right at all, and you just told me something and I don't understand the context. And I was like, shit, I need to rearrange this whole script. Even though I use an outline.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. The outline is useless. I actually ended up writing an outline this time when I realized what I was doing, because it's happened to me the past few times. I didn't really think much of it, but this time it was really bad. And so I ended up writing an outline in like 10 minutes on a piece of paper with how the script should be reordered. And then I just moved things around without changing like anything. And it worked. It was really weird. Like there were even transitions that made sense with each other.
You managed to create atomic ideas that can just be recomposed.
Yes. Exactly. But yeah, it's like the hamburger patty of scripts. So anyways, that leads me into the struggles I've had with my next video, which is going to be about Portsmouth, New Hampshire, my Lord and Savior. But
a lot of people are looking forward to this. I see a lot of rumblings in the comments.
Really? Oh yeah, maybe. Yes, I think I did see that too. Same comment. But no, you know what it is? I think that it's a place that the people who live there know a lot about it. Like most of the residents are actually historically knowledgeable. And so I'm really terrified of fucking it up. That's why I have tried to talk to people. I have tried to research. I mean, and I say this in the video, but the spark for the video came from something pretty specific that I saw, which got me interested in, okay, like now is the right time to do this video. I have an idea to work off of. And big shout out to Professor Dr. Candy of the Portsmouth Athenaeum, which is our historical archive. They have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of historical photos from the city. It's one of the most photographed small towns in America. If I'm being honest with you, there is an unbelievable historical archive of almost everything that's happened in the city.
Sometimes it's just having good archivists, because the archivists, like they're the ones who get that collection together.
No, and that's been part of it, yeah, because these photos were all in disparate places, and I think these photos probably existed for other cities, but they've gotten lost and thrown out, as people have died and things. But with Portsmouth, we were really fortunate that there were some very good photographers working around the area who kept record of stuff and who kept albums and things. So that's really going to help me out. So you guys are going to see a lot of historical photographs, hopefully. I really tried to get some good footage of my own, because this is the kind of video you can't use stock footage for the majority of it. And so it's going to be difficult if I don't have everything I need.
It seems like you don't even want to make a video that like you can make stock footage from, because I don't want to make a video that I can just use stock footage, because someone else could just make that video.
No, and that's the thing. It's really funny. My last video, I was probably the one I used the most stock footage on, because I realized
the farming
after the fact.
Yeah.
Yes, the farming video. I realized after the fact that most of my footage was shit. There were only a few shots in there that actually were originally supposed to be in there. I ended up having to use like free stock footage for the majority of it, and it was my most viewed video. So I don't quite get it.
It was a topic that no one else was really talking about. I think that helped. Although I do always love having my own video in there, because it just makes it's something that only I could do.
Yeah, and for me, the most enjoyable part of the whole thing is filming. It may be the only part of doing YouTube that I really, really enjoy, is coming up with the idea and then filming it. Like I love photography, so
yeah. Maybe that's my thing too. Is like maybe I like it because it forces me to get out and get footage of places that I might not go to, or force me to go to places.
Yeah, it's an excuse to visit something for sure, and it gives me a purpose to be in a place. One last quick thing. Basically, the video itself, I want to talk about how we ended up with the city that we do today, because if you're not too familiar with Portsmouth, New Hampshire, it is a fairly well-preserved town or city, and even though it's not perfect, there's some pretty specific reasons and lessons that I think we can learn from how they did it, because it's sort of like a bookend to my video about Newburyport. These two places where things were happening there at the same time, and the same, not too distant of a place, and not too different of a city. They actually even both have some of the same exact businesses, which are like local family-owned businesses that have a location in each place. So that's kind of the outline for the video. I'm hoping it's coming together soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I like watching all your videos.
You too, seriously.
Thanks. I like seeing Matt's videos too, but that bastard's not here today. So he's not going to hear the damn
train.
Yeah, he's out foaming. So we're gonna head out and see you next time.
Ciao.